A daughter's hidden inheritance and the family secrets that changed everything. The hidden truth. Maya Sullivan's life had always been ordinary, even predictable. A child raised in the small town of Silverwood, she spent her childhood in a house that, while filled with love, was more notable for its modesty than its grandeur. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Or so she had thought. Maya had a father, Andrew, a quiet, hard-working man who worked as a mechanic. Her mother, Sarah, was a schoolteacher, gentle and kind but always preoccupied with making ends meet. They weren't wealthy, but they made sure Maya never went without. Still, there was something about Maya's parents that always seemed distant. Despite the love they showed her, there was a gap that Maya couldn't quite place, something unspoken between them, something hidden in the shadows of their house. Every family has its secrets, but some are buried so deep they remain invisible for a lifetime. Maya was just 24 years old when her world began to unravel, but even then she couldn't have imagined how much her life would change in such a short amount of time. The day it all began was a typical Saturday afternoon. Maya had just finished a long shift at the local diner and was looking forward to a quiet evening at home. She was just about to sit down on her worn-out couch with a cup of tea when her phone rang. "Hello?" Maya said, her voice groggy from the exhaustion of the day. "Maya, it's Jessica," the voice on the other end said. Jessica was her father's lawyer and the last person she had expected to hear from. She hadn't seen Jessica in years. The tone in Jessica's voice was serious, even urgent. "Jessica, what's going on?" Maya asked, sitting up straight. She had a strange feeling that this call wasn't going to be good news. "I need you to come to the office. Your father's will, there's something you need to know," Jessica said. The words hung in the air, and before Maya could respond, Jessica hung up. Maya's heart began to race. What could possibly be so urgent about her father's will? Her parents had never been the type to leave behind riches or complicated estates. They had always been a simple family, and Maya had never expected much more than what they had. She had assumed that when they passed, the house would be the only thing left for her to inherit. Nothing extravagant, just a place full of memories. But as she drove to Jessica's office, a sense of unease settled in her stomach. What could this all be about? Jessica's office was a sleek, modern building on the edge of town, a stark contrast to the small, cozy house Maya had grown up in. She walked into the office, her mind racing, only to be greeted by a somber Jessica who motioned for her to sit. "Maya, I know this must be a shock, but there are things you need to know about your father's estate," Jessica said, her voice grave. "I don't understand. What's going on? My father was a mechanic. He didn't have much. Why am I here?" Maya's voice shook slightly, her confusion mounting. Jessica opened a folder and pushed it across the desk towards Maya. "Your father left behind something much more than you realize. He had an inheritance, one that has remained hidden, even from you. But he made sure that you knew about it after his death. There's a lot I need to explain." Maya's mind reeled. An inheritance. Her father, Andrew Sullivan, had never spoken of any kind of wealth or hidden treasure. He had always been upfront with her, working long hours, struggling to pay bills, but never anything more. Maya had never suspected that there was anything hidden. "Your father," Jessica continued, "was the heir to a considerable fortune, property, investments, and even a share in a business that he never told anyone about. It seems that he kept this secret from even your mother." Maya's heart dropped. Her father, the quiet man who had always seemed so ordinary, had been hiding such a massive secret. Her hands began to tremble as she picked up the papers Jessica had handed her. "The will states that you are entitled to everything that was left for you, but there's one condition," Jessica added, her eyes meeting Maya's with a somber look. Maya felt her stomach twist. A condition? What kind of condition could there be attached to something that belonged to her? "You must be willing to understand the full extent of the situation before you claim your inheritance," Jessica explained. "It's not just about the money, Maya. There are family secrets, things about your father's past that were kept hidden. You'll need to go through everything, learn about the history behind these assets, and the business that's involved. Well, it's tied to your family, in a way you might not expect." Maya left the lawyer's office feeling as if her world had been turned upside down. She couldn't wrap her head around the revelation. All her life, she had thought her family was just like any other, modest, hard-working, and without any special claim to fame or fortune. But now, she had inherited not just a house but a legacy tied to a past her father had hidden from her. Her mind raced with questions as she drove back to her small apartment. Why had her father kept this from her? Why hadn't he ever mentioned his wealth or his family's connections? Maya had never suspected that there was anything more than the life they had shared, one filled with struggle, sacrifice, and the occasional moment of happiness. As she sat down at her kitchen table, the weight of the papers Jessica had handed her pressed heavily on her chest. She flipped through them slowly, her eyes scanning the documents, real estate investments, shares in companies, and detailed financial statements. There were numbers and terms she didn't fully understand, but one thing was clear. Her father had left her something that could change everything. But there was more. Among the papers, there was a letter, one written in her father's handwriting. The letter was short, but it contained a plea. Maya, it began, I know I never told you about this side of our family. I always thought it would be better if you lived your life without knowing these things. But now that I'm gone, it's important that you understand the full truth. There are things you need to know about your mother, my family, and the secrets I've carried for years. Please take the time to find out for yourself. I know this is a lot to ask, but trust me, it's the only way you'll ever understand the truth. It's time for you to claim what is rightfully yours. Maya's hands shook as she finished reading the letter. Her father had kept so much from her, and now she was left to unravel a tangled web of secrets that had been buried for decades. The following weeks were filled with late nights spent researching her family's past. Maya learned about the business her father had secretly owned, about the family connections she had never known existed. It was overwhelming, but the deeper she dug, the more she uncovered. And what she found shocked her to the core. Her father's business empire wasn't just built on hard work. It was built on deception, betrayal, and a long-hidden legacy of power. Her mother, too, had been a part of it all, though she had no idea. It seemed that every corner of Maya's family's history was steeped in secrets. And so, as Maya pieced together the pieces of her past, she began to understand that her inheritance wasn't just a financial gift, it was a key to unlocking the truths that had shaped her family's destiny. What lay ahead was more than just wealth. It was the revelation of who her father truly was and who she herself had become in the process. Unraveling the legacy. Maya Sullivan sat in her modest apartment, surrounded by stacks of papers, each document more perplexing than the last. The glow from her laptop screen flickered dimly in the otherwise dark room. After weeks of research, she had begun to piece together the puzzle of her family's past, one that had remained hidden from her for most of her life. The inheritance, while a financial boon, had brought with it an avalanche of questions. Why had her father kept so much from her? And why had her mother, Sarah, remained so oblivious to the family empire her husband had built? As Maya read through the increasingly cryptic letters and financial statements, one thing became clear. Her family was no ordinary one. She wasn't simply the daughter of Andrew Sullivan, a mechanic who spent his days in a small garage. She was the heir to a significant fortune. One built on years of hard work, yet shrouded in secrecy. The more she dug, the more it seemed like a strange combination of ambition, wealth, and untold betrayals. Her father's business, which she had assumed to be a modest mechanic shop, had actually been a front. Beneath it was an empire, an automotive manufacturing company that had grown exponentially in recent decades. It had started out small, but as Andrew built relationships with the right people, it had grown into something formidable. Maya had always been taught that hard work and integrity were what mattered in life. But now, looking at her father's hidden empire, she had to confront a different reality. Her father's success had come with compromises, hidden deals, and a level of ambition that Maya had never imagined possible. As she sifted through her father's business transactions, one name kept appearing: Richard Hayes. The man had been her father's business partner for years, and it seemed they had built this empire together. But the more Maya uncovered, the more she realized that Richard Hayes was more than just a business partner. He was also a key figure in the hidden side of the family legacy, a legacy that her father had kept from her. Maya leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. Her head ached from trying to make sense of the documents that filled the room. One document in particular caught her eye. A letter from Richard Hayes to her father, Andrew. It was dated just a year before Andrew's death. The letter was simple, but it made Maya's stomach twist. In it, Richard wrote, "Andrew, I know you've always wanted to keep things quiet, but the time has come for you to decide. If we are going to continue with this expansion, we need to make a choice. I've put too much into this business to let it fail now. If you're not willing to go public with this, I'll have to step away. I can't carry this weight alone anymore." What was Richard referring to? What expansion was he talking about? And why hadn't Maya's father shared any of this with her? Maya felt a cold shiver run down her spine as the weight of this discovery sank in. Richard Hayes wasn't just a business partner. He was someone who had shared in the secrets, the lies, and the high-stakes decisions that had shaped their family's wealth. And now, Maya had to confront the possibility that these secrets were part of the reason why her father had kept her in the dark for so long. The more she read, the more she realized that Richard Hayes was still involved in the family business. And now, as the heir to everything, Maya couldn't simply ignore the role he played. There was a deep connection between him, her father, and the family legacy, a connection that Maya had yet to fully understand. But she would have to find out. She had to know the truth. After weeks of uncovering the truth about her father's hidden life, Maya realized that it was time to confront her mother, Sarah. Despite her mother's cold indifference to Maya's existence over the years, Maya could no longer allow the walls of secrecy to stay up. Sarah had to know something, right? She was part of the family too, and she had lived in the house surrounded by this business empire for years. Maya arranged a meeting with her mother, hoping to get some answers. She hadn't seen Sarah in weeks, but the few conversations they had over the phone had always been strained, full of awkward silences. This time, Maya wasn't going to hold back. She sat at the kitchen table in her mother's house, the same house she had grown up in. The house was familiar, yet everything about it felt foreign now. Maya had spent her childhood here trying to make herself seen, trying to make her parents love her. But now, all those memories felt tainted by the revelations she had uncovered. Sarah finally walked into the room, looking older than Maya remembered. The lines on her face had deepened over the years, and her eyes lacked the spark they once had. "Maya," Sarah said softly, sitting down opposite her daughter. "What is this about? Why the sudden meeting?" "I need to know the truth, Mom," Maya said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet urgency. "I need to know why you and Dad kept everything from me, the inheritance, the business. Why didn't you tell me about any of it?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding Maya's gaze. "Maya, don't lie to me," Maya interrupted. "I've seen the documents. I know about the business. I know about the partnership with Richard Hayes. I know about everything Dad was hiding." Sarah's face went pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Maya could see the guilt in her eyes. "I was just a kid," Maya continued. "Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? Why did you let me live a life where I felt invisible? I deserve to know what happened, to know what this family's really built on." For a long moment, Sarah didn't speak. Maya could feel the tension in the air, thick and uncomfortable. She had waited years for her mother to acknowledge her, to show some kind of affection or understanding. But now, standing face to face with the truth, Maya knew that nothing was going to change. I didn't want you to know," Sarah finally said, her voice shaky. "Your father wanted to protect you from the world we were a part of. He didn't want you to get involved in all of that." "And protect me?" Maya asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You think keeping me in the dark was protecting me?" Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "I didn't know what else to do. Your father, he was complicated. He had things to answer for, but I couldn't bear to see you get hurt. We thought it was best if you just lived a simple life, far away from all the money, the business." Maya shook her head, feeling anger and frustration rise within her. "But I wasn't just a bystander in this, Mom. I'm your daughter. You should have trusted me." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." Maya left her mother's house that afternoon with a storm of emotions swirling inside her. She had wanted answers, but the truth had only opened more wounds. Her mother's words felt hollow, like a last-ditch attempt to protect herself from the consequences of the family's secrets. The revelation of the inheritance and the hidden empire her father had built weighed heavily on Maya's shoulders. She felt betrayed, hurt, and confused. But one thing became clear: she couldn't move forward without facing the truth head-on. She had inherited not just wealth, but a legacy full of deception and betrayal. Maya now had to decide what to do with the power and responsibility her father had left her. She couldn't change the past, but she could shape the future. And as she made her way through this tumultuous journey, she realized that her next steps would determine whether she would continue her father's legacy or forge a new path, one that was truly her own. Confronting the shadows, Maya's mind swirled as she sat alone in her apartment, staring out the window. The city below her looked so calm, so unaware of the storm that raged inside her. She had always dreamed of escaping the suffocating weight of her family's expectations and secrets, but now that she had inherited their legacy, the question loomed: what kind of future could she have if it was built on betrayal and lies? She had gone to her mother for answers, only to be met with hollow excuses. The silence in her mother's eyes spoke volumes. Sarah hadn't just kept Maya in the dark for protection. She had buried her head in the sand, hoping that Maya would never find out the truth. It was easier that way, but now, the weight of that truth was crushing her. Maya leaned back in her chair, trying to push away the overwhelming sense of betrayal. She could feel the presence of her grandparents in the back of her mind, two people who had always been there for her when no one else was. They had shown her what real love was, but now they were gone, and it was up to her to navigate this complicated web of wealth, power, and secrets on her own. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and visits to the family business that had once seemed so distant. Maya had received a call from one of her father's former associates, a man named Gregory Stone, who had worked alongside Andrew Sullivan for years. Gregory had been one of the few people who seemed to know the full extent of the business that Andrew had kept hidden from his family. "Miss Sullivan," Gregory's voice had crackled over the phone. "I'm sure you've been going through your father's papers. There's more to the story than just the financial records and those letters you found. There are people, business deals, things that are complicated. Your father was involved in some high-stakes situations that you don't know about. I can help you, but you have to meet me." Maya felt a mix of curiosity and dread. The last thing she wanted was to dive further into the murky world her father had left behind, but she needed answers, answers that her mother wouldn't give her, answers that her father could no longer provide. So she agreed to meet Gregory. She drove to a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, a place far from the world her family inhabited, a place where the noise of her inheritance and its implications could fade, even if just for a moment. As she entered the cafe, she saw Gregory sitting in the corner, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a tired expression. He looked like someone who had seen too much and perhaps was finally ready to speak the truth. "You're here," Gregory said, standing as she approached. "I'll keep this brief, but you need to understand something about your father. Andrew was more than just a businessman. He had his hands in things that—" Gregory paused, choosing his words carefully. "That would have made it impossible for you to understand. He didn't want you involved in it, not because he didn't trust you, but because he was trying to protect you from people like Richard Hayes." "Richard Hayes," Maya repeated, her heart racing as the name resurfaced. It had been a constant presence in her father's papers, but she had yet to fully understand the connection. "Who's he? Why does his name keep coming up?" Gregory leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Hayes was your father's business partner. But he wasn't just any partner. He was a fixer, someone who could make problems disappear. But he had his own interests, and those interests weren't always in line with your father's values. Hayes was involved in some very questionable activities." Maya's mind reeled. Her father had worked with a man like that. Had Andrew been a part of something darker than she had ever imagined? "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" Maya asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Why didn't anyone tell me about Richard Hayes or all these other things?" Gregory sighed deeply, looking away as if the weight of his own guilt bore down on him. "We tried, Ms. Sullivan. We tried to protect you, but your father was adamant that you wouldn't be exposed to that world. He wanted you to live a normal life, away from all the mess. But it wasn't just business, it was family too. Hayes was a part of your family's history, whether you like it or not." Maya left the cafe feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The secrets she had uncovered were beginning to paint a much darker picture of her father and his choices. But she couldn't ignore the pull of the truth. She had to know more. She drove back to her apartment in silence, her mind racing with new questions. What had her father really been involved in? How had Richard Hayes become such a central figure in their lives? And what role had Sarah played in all of this? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. It was an unknown number, but the name that flashed across the screen made her heart stop. Richard Hayes. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Maya Sullivan," a deep voice said on the other end. "I think it's time we had a conversation." Maya knew that this was the moment when everything would change. Richard Hayes wasn't just some distant figure from her father's past. He was still part of the present, and he had his own agenda. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about power, control, and the legacy that Maya had inherited. "Why are you calling me?" Maya asked, her voice firm, though she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you want?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was calm, almost too calm. "I think it's time you learned the full story, Maya. Your father didn't just leave you an inheritance. He left you something much more valuable, a key to understanding what's really going on. And if you want to protect your future, you need to know the truth." The line went dead before she could respond. Maya sat there for a moment, feeling both a sense of dread and determination. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't back down now. The secrets had been buried for too long, and it was time for her to uncover them. Unraveling the past. Maya sat alone in her apartment that evening, her fingers trembling slightly as she stared at the phone still cold from Richard Hayes's call. His words echoed in her mind, chilling her to the bone. Your father left you something more valuable, a key to understanding what's really going on. The weight of his statement pressed down on her chest, suffocating her as she thought about the next steps. She had inherited not just the house but a tangled web of secrets. What could he mean by a key? Was there something hidden in her father's belongings, something that could reveal the truth about what had been going on all these years? The realization hit her like a bolt of lightning. Her father, Andrew Sullivan, had kept so many things from her, so many truths buried beneath the facade of a perfect family. Maya stood up abruptly, determination replacing the dread in her gut. She had to find answers. Whatever it took. She couldn't allow herself to be kept in the dark any longer. The answers were out there and she would uncover them, piece by piece. The next morning, Maya drove to the family estate, the house her father had once owned, and the house that now belonged to her. The mansion was eerily quiet when she arrived, like a ghost of its former self. The once grand living room, filled with warmth and laughter, now felt hollow. It was as if the house knew that everything had changed, that the secrets her family had tried so hard to keep hidden were finally coming to light. She walked through the rooms, the weight of history pressing down on her. She wasn't just standing in her father's house, she was standing in the very heart of everything that had shaped her life, everything that had shaped her identity. Maya made her way to the study, the room where her father had always worked late into the night, hidden away from the world. The air was thick with the scent of old books and leather. It was in this room that Maya had often seen her father buried in paperwork, his face etched with worry. She had never understood the gravity of those moments back then, but now, standing here, everything seemed to take on a new meaning. Maya ran her hand over the desk, pausing as her fingers brushed against something cold, something hidden beneath a stack of papers. She pulled the papers aside, revealing a thick folder tucked away in the corner of the desk. Her heart raced as she opened it. Inside, she found a collection of legal documents, contracts, and handwritten notes, but one document caught her attention. An old, faded letter addressed to her father. The writing was neat but rushed, almost frantic. She read aloud to herself, Andrew, you know what must be done. The deal with Hayes is in motion, and we cannot afford any mistakes. This is our last chance to secure the future. If you want your family to survive, you must make the right choice. I've set up everything. The inheritance is ready for you, but remember, there are no second chances. The clock is ticking. Maya's stomach twisted as she read the letter. What had her father gotten involved in? And why had he kept this from her? The mention of Hayes was no coincidence. Richard Hayes had played a role in this web of deceit, but what role had her father taken on? And what about her mother? Her mind raced, and she felt the heat of determination surge through her. She wasn't just looking for answers anymore. She was unraveling the past, a past filled with lies and hidden agendas. Maya sat back in her chair, the letter still in her hands. She could feel the weight of the truth slowly unfolding. This wasn't just about money, it was about survival. And now, it seemed, she had to finish what her father had started. But as much as she wanted to take matters into her own hands, she knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed help. Someone who knew more than she did about the dangerous game her father and Richard Hayes had been playing. Her first thought was Gregory Stone, the man who had reached out to her before. He had seemed to know more than anyone else, and he had warned her that she needed to understand the full picture if she was going to protect herself and her inheritance. Maya dialed his number, her fingers shaking slightly as she pressed the call button. It rang for a few moments before Gregory's familiar voice answered. Miss Sullivan, he said, his tone polite but guarded. I see you've started digging into things. I warned you, but you're in deep now. You need to be careful. I know, Maya replied, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. I found something in my father's study, a letter from someone. It mentioned a deal with Hayes. What was it about? What did my father get involved in? Gregory sighed heavily on the other end of the line. Your father wasn't just a businessman, Maya. He was trying to play the game Hayes' game, and in that world, there are no winners. Your father was desperate, and Hayes knew how to exploit that. The letter you found. It's the first clue. Your father was being pressured into a deal that would have secured your family's future. But it was a dangerous one. A deal that involved more than just money. It involved power, influence, and, well, it involved some people who didn't take kindly to being crossed. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. This was bigger than she had ever imagined. Her father had made a choice, one that had put everything at risk. But for what? And why had he kept her out of it? "I need to know everything, Gregory," she said, her voice firm. "If I'm going to fix this, if I'm going to understand what my father did, I need to know the whole story." Gregory hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low, almost reluctant voice. "I can help you, but it won't be easy. There are people involved in this who won't want the truth to come out, and they will stop at nothing to protect their interests." Maya sat in silence, digesting Gregory's words. He was right. She was about to walk down a dangerous path, one that could cost her everything. But there was no turning back now. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "Tell me what I need to do." Gregory's tone softened, a hint of admiration in his voice. "You've got guts, Maya. I'll give you that. All right. Here's what you need to know. There are two key players in this game. Hayes and your father's old partner, Jonathan King. King's been out of the picture for years, but I've got reason to believe he's still involved. You need to find out what he knows." Maya nodded, taking in the information. Two men, one goal: control. Her father had been trying to hold on to his legacy, and in doing so he had made dangerous enemies. "Where do I find Jonathan King?" she asked, determination fueling her words. Gregory hesitated, then replied, "That's the tricky part. He's disappeared off the grid for years. But there's someone who might know where he is, someone who owes me a favor. I'll make a call." Maya felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the next step. The first piece of the puzzle was falling into place, and with it, the possibility of finally uncovering the truth. The search for Jonathan King. Maya's phone buzzed on the table in front of her. She picked it up, her pulse quickening when she saw that it was a message from Gregory Stone. "I've got a lead. Meet me at 5 p.m. at the Green Lantern Cafe. I'll tell you everything you need to know." The message was cryptic, but it was the first solid lead she had since she started digging into her father's secrets. Her heart raced in anticipation. She had no idea what she was walking into, but she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't stop now. The Green Lantern Cafe was a small, quiet spot in the heart of the city, a place Maya had passed by countless times but never bothered to enter. It was a cozy cafe with dim lighting, vintage posters on the walls, and the faint smell of roasted coffee beans. The kind of place that seemed to attract people who wanted to talk without being overheard. Maya stepped inside, scanning the room. The cafe wasn't crowded, but she quickly spotted Gregory in a booth near the back. He looked different from the man she had spoken to on the phone. His usual calm demeanor was now tinged with concern. As Maya walked over to him, she could see the lines of worry etched across his face. "Gregory," she greeted him, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension building inside her. "Good to see you, Maya," Gregory replied, his eyes scanning the room for any unwanted attention. "Sit down. I've got some things to tell you, and I think it's best we talk quickly." Maya slid into the booth across from him, her hands resting on the table, but her mind was elsewhere. What was this lead Gregory had? Was it the key to finding Jonathan King? "I've been doing some digging," Gregory began, his voice low. "Jonathan King is harder to track than I expected, but I've got someone who might know where he is. There's a guy, Martin Blackwell. He's an old associate of King's. He used to run in the same circles. If anyone knows where King is, it's Blackwell." Maya listened intently, her mind processing the information. Martin Blackwell, the name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. What did he have to do with her father's past? "Do you know where to find him?" Maya asked, her voice sharp. Gregory nodded. "He's been living off the radar for a while now, but I have a way to reach him. It won't be easy, but it's the best shot we've got." Maya felt a surge of frustration. Every answer seemed to lead to another question. Why does he matter? What's his connection to Jonathan King? Gregory leaned back in the booth, his fingers tapping nervously against his coffee cup. King and Blackwell were business partners back in the day. They were involved in some pretty questionable things. Money laundering, illegal deals, the kind of things that can ruin people's lives if they're not careful. Your father, he got tangled up in it somehow. And I think Blackwell might be the key to understanding how deep this thing goes. Then Maya's chest tightened. She had always known her father's business dealings were shady, but this was something she never imagined. And why hasn't anyone mentioned this before? Why didn't my parents tell me any of this? Gregory's gaze softened. Because they wanted to protect you. Or at least that's what they think. They wanted to keep you out of it all. But now that you're involved, you need to understand the full picture. Maya exhaled slowly, her mind spinning. "So, what do we do now?" Gregory's expression hardened. "We find Martin Blackwell, you get the answers you need from him, and then we can go after Jonathan King. We have to figure out what your father really got into and why he left you with all these secrets. It's the only way you can take control of your inheritance. Maya nodded. It was a lot to take in, but there was no turning back now. She had come this far, and there was no way she was going to stop until she uncovered the full truth. Later that evening, Maya found herself in front of a run-down building on the outskirts of the city. Martin Blackwell's address was nothing like what she had imagined. No fancy offices, no well-kept homes. It looked like a place where people went to disappear. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open, the creaking of the hinges echoing in the quiet hallway. Inside, the smell of stale cigarettes and old furniture filled the air. Maya's heart raced as she made her way down the narrow hall, each step taking her closer to the man who might hold the key to everything. At the end of the hall, she found a door with a small sign that read, Martin Blackwell. She hesitated, but only for a moment. She knocked softly, her knuckles tapping against the wooden surface. There was a long silence before the door cracked open, revealing a man in his late 50s. His hair was graying, his face lined with age, but his eyes still held a sharpness that made Maya's stomach tighten. "Who are you?" the man asked, his voice gruff, his gaze scanning her up and down. "I'm Maya Sullivan," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves that threatened to overwhelm her. "I need to talk to you about Jonathan King." The man's eyes narrowed at the mention of King's name, and he glanced over his shoulder as if making sure no one was listening. "You're treading dangerous waters, girl," he said, his tone low. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I need to know the truth," Maya said, her voice unwavering. "I need to understand what my father was involved in and how it all connects to King, my inheritance. It's all tangled up in this, and I want answers." Martin Blackwell's gaze softened just slightly, as if he was weighing something in his mind. He stepped aside and motioned for her to come in. "All right," he said, his voice reluctant. "I'll tell you what I know. But you'd better be ready for the truth. The secrets of the past unfold." Maya stood in front of the sleek black door to Martin Blackwell's office, her heart racing. She had spent weeks tracking down the elusive lawyer, piecing together fragments of information she had gathered from various sources. Everything she had learned pointed to one undeniable truth. Martin Blackwell was the key to unlocking the mystery of her inheritance, and possibly the answers to the family's secrets that had haunted her for years. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the walls lined with bookshelves filled with old leather-bound volumes. A large mahogany desk sat at the center with a single chair in front of it. Martin Blackwell sat behind the desk, his expression unreadable as he looked up from the papers in front of him. "Maya Sullivan," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I've been expecting you." Maya hesitated for a moment before responding. "You know why I'm here, don't you?" Her voice was steady, though her nerves were on edge. Martin leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers in front of him. "I know you have questions. I've been asked to answer them, though I suspect you already know the truth." Maya's stomach churned. "I don't know the whole truth," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I know enough to know that you're involved. You were my father's lawyer, and now I find myself inheriting everything he built. But I don't know why, or how." Martin's eyes darkened, a flicker of something Maya couldn't quite place flashing across his face. "Your father, Jonathan King, was a man of many secrets, some of which he took to his grave. Others he entrusted to me." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "You knew my father's secrets?" Martin nodded slowly. "I was more than just his lawyer. I was his confidant, his advisor, and in many ways his partner in crime." Maya's mind raced. "Crime?" she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "My father was involved in criminal activity." Martin didn't flinch. "Not in the way you think," he said, his voice calm. "Jonathan King wasn't a criminal, not in the sense you might expect, but he made decisions, dark decisions, to ensure his wealth and power remained unchallenged. He did what needed to be done." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Martin stood up, walking around his desk to stand in front of her. "I'm saying that your father's wealth wasn't built on the cleanest of hands. It wasn't just business deals and investments that made him successful. It was, well, let's just say he didn't always play by the rules." Maya felt the weight of his words settle heavily in the pit of her stomach. She had always known her father to be distant, cold even, but she had never considered the possibility that his success had come at such a price. "You're saying my inheritance comes from blood money?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. Martin looked at her, his expression grave. In a way, yes, but it's not just about the money. It's about the legacy he left behind, the things he built, the power he held, and the people he manipulated to get there. Maya shook her head, trying to process the enormity of what she was hearing. But why me? Why did my father leave everything to me? Martin paused before speaking. Your father's decisions weren't always wise, Maya, but there was one thing he always wanted for you. He wanted you to have the life he never could. He wanted you to have a chance to make your own choices, to choose your own path. He knew what he had done, and he knew that he couldn't undo it. So, he left everything to you in the hopes that you would use it wisely, for something better. Maya felt a wave of nausea wash over her. You're telling me that my father's entire life, all of it, was built on lies and deceit, and now I'm supposed to carry that legacy? Martin's expression softened slightly. You're not your father, Maya. You don't have to carry his sins. You have the power to change things, to make a difference. But you'll have to confront the truth first. Maya looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. I don't know if I can live with this legacy. Martin placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. You don't have to do it alone. I'm here to help. And so are your grandparents. They've always known what your father did. They knew the truth long before you did. Maya's heart skipped a beat. My grandparents, they knew? Martin nodded. They knew, Maya. They tried to protect you from the truth, from the darkness of your father's past. But they also knew that one day you would have to face it. And when that time came, they knew you would be strong enough to handle it. Maya stood there, feeling the weight of the past and the future closing in on her. She had always known there was something off about her family, something she couldn't put her finger on. But now, standing in front of Martin Blackwell, everything was starting to make sense. Her father's coldness, his distance, the secrets he kept hidden, all of it had been part of a larger, more sinister plan. I don't know what to do next, Maya said, her voice barely audible. How do I move forward from here? Martin looked at her with a mixture of pity and respect. You take control, Maya. You use what your father left you. Not for greed or power, but for something greater. You make sure the mistakes of the past don't define your future. You have the chance to change everything, but only if you're willing to confront the truth and make the hard decisions. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle into her bones. She had never asked for this inheritance, never asked for the burden of her father's legacy. But now, she understood. The truth was out there, and it was up to her to uncover it, to face it, and to decide what kind of person she would become. She looked up at Martin, her eyes steady and determined. I'll do it. I'll uncover the truth no matter what it takes. I'm not going to let my father's mistakes define who I am. Martin nodded, a slight smile tugging at his lips. That's the spirit, Maya. The road ahead won't be easy, but I have no doubt that you'll make the right choices. As Maya walked out of the office, she felt a strange sense of resolve settle over her. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to face it head-on. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to uncover the truth and take control of her own destiny. The path of discovery. Maya stood in front of her apartment window, gazing out at the city below. The lights flickered in the distance, casting a faint glow that mirrored the flickering sense of hope within her. But despite the small spark ignited by her conversation with Martin Blackwell, the weight of her father's legacy hung heavily on her shoulders. She knew she had to act, she had to uncover the full extent of the secrets her family had kept from her. But where would she begin? What truths would she uncover that could change everything? The morning after her meeting with Martin, Maya woke up early. She had to get to work, but before she did, she made a promise to herself. She would start taking control of her life. She would no longer be the passive bystander in her own story. She would confront the truth, even if it meant unraveling the painful history of her father and their family. With a renewed determination, she packed her things and headed to the office. As a financial analyst at one of the top firms in the city, she had a demanding job that required precision, attention to detail, and an understanding of complex financial systems. But today, as Maya sat down at her desk, her mind was elsewhere. She couldn't focus on the numbers on the screen. Her thoughts kept circling back to the conversation with Martin. Who was Jonathan King, really? How deep did his web of lies go? What was hidden in the papers that her grandparents had saved for her? These questions clawed at her, demanding answers. But Maya knew that finding the truth would be no simple task. She would need help, expert help, and she was willing to take whatever steps necessary to dig deeper into the past. Maya spent the next few hours looking through old files, searching for any trace of information that could lead her to the truth. She pored over documents about her father's business dealings, his financial reports, and any public records she could access. With each new discovery, the picture of her father's life began to form. But it was a picture that didn't match the man she had known as her father. He wasn't just a businessman. He was involved in something much darker, something that she hadn't expected. After lunch, Maya made the call to a private investigator named Ethan Carter. Ethan had a reputation for being meticulous, discreet, and fearless when it came to uncovering secrets. Maya had met him through a mutual contact in the industry, and after discussing her situation with him briefly, she knew he was the person she needed. As soon as she reached him, he agreed to meet her. Later that afternoon, they sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. Maya felt a sense of urgency, a deep need to move forward and uncover the truth no matter where it led. Ethan listened carefully as she recounted what she had learned so far, the fragments of information, her suspicions, and the discoveries she had made about her father's business. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving her face. "You've got a lot to work with," he said, his voice calm but filled with intensity. "But it's not going to be easy. Your father wasn't just a businessman. There's more to this story than what's in the public records." "I know," Maya replied, her voice firm. "I don't care what I have to do. I need the truth." Ethan gave her a small smile, then pulled out a notepad from his bag. "Let's start with what you know," he said. "We'll work backwards from there." Maya spent the next hour recounting every detail, every conversation she had overheard, and every shred of evidence she had come across. Ethan listened carefully, jotting down notes. He asked for details about specific individuals in her father's life, business partners, associates, and anyone who might have information about his dealings. By the end of their meeting, Maya had a list of leads to follow. "Don't worry about how long it takes," Ethan said as they stood to leave. "I'll take care of the legwork. But be prepared for the truth to be far worse than you think. Sometimes the past is buried for a reason." Maya nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She wasn't going to back down now. She had come too far to let fear stop her. The answers were out there and she was going to find them. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her bed, her mind racing with the possibilities of what she might uncover. She could almost feel the weight of her father's secrets pressing down on her, smothering her with the realization that her entire life had been built on lies. She had to know what was hidden in the vault of his history. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, research, and phone calls. Ethan's team was gathering information, and Maya found herself following up on every lead. As she sifted through financial records and documents that seemed like a foreign language to her, one thing became clear. Her father's wealth wasn't just built on legitimate investments and savvy business moves. There were transactions, large sums of money that led back to shady figures, to investments in businesses that operated in the shadows. Her father's empire had been constructed not just with ambition, but with deceit and manipulation. As the days went by, Maya's unease grew. What kind of man had her father been? What had he been involved in? And what role had Martin Blackwell played in all of this? Then, one evening, Maya received a call from Ethan. His voice was serious as he spoke. "Maya, we found something," he said. "It's not good." Her heart sank. "What did you find?" "We traced some of your father's investments to a company called Blackstone Enterprises. It's a front for something much larger. There's evidence of money laundering, illegal activity, and, well, some things I can't even tell you over the phone." Maya's world tilted on its axis. "Blackstone Enterprises? Is that why my father had all those business dealings?" Ethan's voice lowered. "Yes, and much more. Your father was involved in a network that, well, let's just say it's far darker than anything you imagined." Maya stood frozen, her mind reeling with the implications of what she was hearing. The father she had always known, the one who had seemed so distant and cold, was entangled in a web of criminal activity that she couldn't have fathomed. She had thought she was inheriting a fortune built from hard work and success. Instead, she was now the heir to a legacy of corruption and deceit. "I need to know everything, Ethan," Maya said, her voice shaking but determined. "I'm not backing down. Whatever it takes, I'll uncover the truth." Ethan paused before responding. "I'll get everything for you, Maya, but be careful. Some things are better left buried." But Maya knew that she couldn't turn back now. The past was coming to light, and she was ready to face whatever it held. Whatever truths awaited her, she would face them head-on no matter the cost. Uncovering the shadows. Maya woke up early the next morning, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "I've found something important. Meet me at the office. 2 p.m. She stared at the message for a long moment. Every part of her wanted to ask him what he had discovered, but she knew she had to be patient. This was it, the moment when everything would come crashing down, or when her father's secrets would finally be uncovered. She dressed quickly, unable to focus on anything but the meeting. When she arrived at Ethan's office, the tension in her chest only grew. The dimly lit office, cluttered with papers, legal files, and old books, felt too small for the weight of what they were about to reveal. Ethan was pacing the room, clearly deep in thought. "Sit down, Maya," Ethan said as he noticed her standing by the door. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Maya sat down slowly, trying to calm the whirlwind inside her. "What did you find, Ethan?" Her voice came out steady, though her hands were clenched tightly on her lap. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. Maya's heart skipped a beat as he placed it in front of her. "This is a copy of your father's financial records, specifically related to Blackstone Enterprises," Ethan began. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "What you're about to see is the last part of your father's legacy, a legacy you didn't know about." Maya opened the envelope, pulling out thick sheets of paper filled with complex numbers, names of businesses, and transactions that seemed like another language. She scanned them quickly, her mind racing. She felt a growing sense of dread as she realized that many of the companies her father had invested in were not just legitimate businesses, they were involved in illegal activities. It was more than just money laundering. There were traces of human trafficking, organized crime, and connections to powerful, dangerous figures. These numbers, they're linked to underground operations," Maya whispered, her voice trembling as she scanned the documents. Ethan nodded gravely. "Yes, your father's money wasn't just made through legitimate means. He was involved in something much larger, an international network of illicit businesses. And Blackstone Enterprises was the hub for all of it. These documents show everything." Maya's mind reeled. She had thought her father's absence had been a result of business commitments or personal indifference, but now she understood that the void in their relationship had been much deeper than she had ever imagined. He had been tangled in a world of crime, and Maya had been left in the dark, completely unaware. "How long?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan sat down beside her, taking a deep breath. "It started around the time you were born, Maya. Your father got involved with the wrong people and slowly worked his way up, investing money into operations that most people would never even dream of. The trail leads all the way back to when he first started his business, before you even knew about the empire he was building." Maya felt a chill crawl down her spine as the magnitude of it all hit her. Her father had been building an empire based on lies, betrayal, and violence, and she had been living in the shadow of that empire her whole life. "But why? Why would he do this?" Maya asked, her voice cracking. She had always thought of her father as a distant cold man, but this was something else entirely. She couldn't fathom why he would make these choices. "I'm afraid that's something only he could answer," Ethan said, his voice soft with sympathy. "But what I do know is that it's too dangerous for you to continue pursuing this alone. There are people who won't hesitate to silence anyone who gets too close to the truth." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "I can't just let this go. I have to know what happened. I need to know everything." Ethan met her gaze, his expression hardening. "I understand, but you have to be careful. These people won't hesitate to hurt you, and if they think you know too much, they'll stop at nothing to make sure you don't." Maya nodded. She had come this far, and there was no turning back. The truth had always been a distant dream for her, something she had never expected to uncover, but now that she had the key, there was no way she would let it slip away. "I'm ready," Maya said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. "I'll do whatever it takes." Ethan gave her a long look, then stood up. "All right, I'll make the arrangements. We'll need to go deeper into this, but remember, we do this together. You're not alone in this anymore." Maya stood as well, a wave of determination sweeping over her. She had no idea what the next steps would be, but she knew one thing for sure. She would uncover every secret, and nothing would stop her. The pieces of her father's dark legacy were falling into place, and she would bring it all to light. As Maya walked out of Ethan's office, she felt the weight of what was to come pressing down on her. There was no going back now. The journey to the truth had only just begun, and she was prepared to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The final confrontation. Maya sat in the dimly lit office, the documents strewn across the desk in front of her. She had always trusted her father. He was the pillar of her life, the man who had raised her, the one who had promised her a future full of possibilities. But now, with every page she flipped, the picture of him began to crumble. The truth about his involvement in the criminal world was undeniable, and with each revelation, Maya's heart sank a little more. She had known her father, Michael Sullivan, as a hard-working businessman, a man who smiled warmly, who was always there for her at every important moment of her life. But now she was staring at evidence that he had been part of a network of illegal deals, laundering money, and making shady connections with some of the most dangerous people in the city. The businesses he had run, the high-rise buildings, the luxury cars, the secretive meetings had all been built on lies, deception, and crime. Ethan had been a constant presence in her journey, helping her piece together the puzzle of her father's life, but even he seemed troubled by what they were uncovering. The more they dug, the more dangerous it became. Maya's eyes wandered to the stack of financial documents on the desk, each one telling the story of a man she never truly knew. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Ethan's voice cut through the silence, his tone quieter than usual. Maya looked up, meeting his gaze. "There's no turning back now, Ethan. I need to know everything. I have to understand why he did this, why he kept this from me and from everyone." Ethan nodded slowly, stepping closer to her. He had been more than just a private investigator. Over the past few months, he had become her closest ally, someone who had seen the anguish behind her determined exterior. But now, he too was beginning to feel the weight of the situation. The stakes had never been higher. "You're not just putting yourself in danger now," he warned, his voice low. "You're up against powerful people, people who won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to protect their interests. You've already made some enemies. What you're about to uncover, it won't just hurt your father's legacy. It could destroy everything you've built up so far." Maya inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "I know, but I can't live with the lies anymore. I need the truth. And if that means facing these people, then I'll do it." She could see the hesitation in Ethan's eyes, the concern he had for her. But she was resolute. She had spent her whole life in the shadow of her father's secrets. The truth, no matter how ugly, was the only way to move forward. As if on cue, the door to the office creaked open and Maya's phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at the screen, an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat, but she answered it anyway. "This is Maya Sullivan," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. A gruff voice came through the phone. "Maya Sullivan, you've been digging into things that aren't meant for you to uncover. You need to stop. You don't know who you're messing with." Her blood ran cold. It was him, one of the men she had been tracking down in the documents, a figure in the criminal network her father had been involved with. Maya clenched her fists, trying to hide the fear that threatened to rise. "You think I'm just going to sit back and pretend I don't know the truth?" Maya's voice was strong, but her pulse raced. "I'm not afraid of you." The voice on the other end laughed, a low, menacing sound. "You should be. If you keep pushing, you won't just end up with answers. You'll end up buried with them. I suggest you forget what you've learned, or we'll make sure you regret it." The line went dead. Maya set the phone down, her hands trembling. Ethan, who had been listening intently, walked over to her side. "They're getting desperate," he said quietly. "You've got to be careful, Maya. These people don't play by the rules. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their empire." Maya stood up, her decision made. "I've come too far to turn back now. I need to know everything, no matter what it takes." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'll help you, but you have to understand, there's no going back from this." Maya nodded. "I know." The next few days were a blur of phone calls, late-night research, and careful coordination with Ethan. She began piecing together the last of the puzzle, uncovering her father's involvement with criminal syndicates, money laundering operations, and connections to some of the most powerful and dangerous figures in the city. The deeper she went, the more she realized how much of her life had been built on a lie. But Maya wasn't just searching for the truth for herself anymore. She was searching for justice for the people who had been hurt by her father's actions. She wanted to understand why he had chosen this path, why he had kept her in the dark for so many years. One evening, while going over some final details with Ethan, Maya's phone rang again. This time, it was a familiar number, her mother's. Her heart skipped a beat. "Mom?" she said, her voice shaky. "Maya, we need to talk." Her mother's voice came through the phone, strained and urgent. "Please meet me. It's about your father." Maya's stomach tightened. This was it. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it had arrived, She wasn't sure what to expect. What new truths would her mother reveal, and would she be ready to hear them? "I'll meet you," Maya said firmly, hanging up the phone. Maya and Ethan made their way to the meeting place, an old, quiet cafe on the edge of the city. As Maya walked in, she spotted her mother sitting at a corner table, her face tired and drawn. She had always been the pillar of strength in Maya's life, but tonight she looked different, vulnerable, broken even. Maya sat down, her heart pounding. "What's going on, Mom? What do you know about Dad? What did you want to tell me?" Her mother's eyes filled with tears as she spoke. "I never wanted you to know the truth, Maya, but you deserve to know. Your father, he wasn't who you thought he was. He was involved in things that I never understood, things I couldn't stop." Maya listened in silence, the weight of her father's secret life pressing down on her shoulders. This was the moment that would change everything. She had been digging into the truth, but now it was staring her in the face. The man she had loved, the man she had idolized, was a stranger. Her mother's voice cracked as she continued. "I didn't want you to be part of that world. I kept you away from it, tried to protect you. But now I see what he's done, and I don't know if I can fix it." Maya reached out and took her mother's hand, her own trembling. "We'll figure it out, Mom. We have to. The truth is the only way forward." This was just the beginning. As Maya looked into her mother's eyes, she knew the journey ahead would be harder than she had ever imagined. But she was determined to uncover everything. She had come too far to back down now. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. And this, Maya realized, was the moment everything would change. Maya sat alone in her apartment, staring at the pile of documents Ethan had given her. The weight of the truth pressed heavily on her chest, each financial record painting a darker picture of her father's life, hidden debts, illegal transactions, and connections to shady figures she had never imagined. The once innocent memories of her childhood seemed like lies now. Her father, the man who had raised her, was nothing like the hero she had always believed him to be. His actions, his choices, everything was tainted by greed and manipulation. The family legacy she had thought was built on hard work was actually founded on corruption and deceit. Maya closed her eyes, her mind racing. How could she have been so blind? But now, armed with the truth, she couldn't turn away. Her father's secrets were her inheritance, and she had to confront them, no matter the cost. The phone rang, breaking her from her thoughts. It was Ethan. "Are you ready to face what comes next?" he asked, his voice steady but tinged with concern. Maya hesitated. She knew the risks of uncovering the full truth, the danger that lurked around every corner, the powerful people who would do anything to protect their interests. But she couldn't back down now. She needed to know everything, no matter how dangerous it would be. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. "We can't stop now. We have to expose everything." As the call ended, Maya felt a sense of resolve settle over her. There was no turning back. The truth was out there, and she was determined to bring it into the light, no matter what the consequences might be. This was the beginning of a new chapter in her journey, a chapter filled with more risks, more danger, and more revelations. The deeper she dug into her father's legacy, the closer she came to uncovering the dark truths that could tear her family apart. But Maya was ready. The past would no longer control her future. It was time for Maya to take charge of her destiny. The final confrontation, Maya's resolve was unshakable as she prepared for the next step in her journey. She knew the stakes were high, the risks even higher, but the truth about her father's life had to be exposed. The pieces of her father's tangled web of criminal activities were falling into place, and with each new revelation, she felt both a sense of horror and a newfound strength. Ethan had become her only ally in this, a man whose expertise and knowledge of the shadows her father had lived in were invaluable. They had been working together for weeks now, tracing back through financial transactions, tracking down key witnesses, and piecing together a picture of the corrupt empire her father had built. One night, Maya sat at her desk, surrounded by papers, when Ethan called her with urgent news. "Meet me at the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's time to confront the man behind everything." Her heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had been preparing for. This was where it would all come to a head. Maya grabbed her jacket, her mind focused. She wasn't sure what would happen when she walked into that warehouse, but she knew she had to go. The drive to the warehouse felt like an eternity, each a mile pulling her deeper into the unknown. As she neared the location, her hands tightened around the steering wheel. This was no longer about finding out the truth, it was about exposing it, about holding the people who had wronged her family accountable. When she arrived, the place was dark and eerily silent. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows boarded up, the doors hanging loosely. Ethan was already there, waiting in the shadows. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice low. "We're at the final step. The man behind all of this is here, and we're going to make him talk." Maya nodded, her stomach tight with anxiety. This was it. The confrontation that would change everything. They made their way into the warehouse, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Suddenly, the sound of a door creaking open broke the silence. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, someone Maya had never seen before, but knew instantly. "Mr. Caldwell," Ethan said, his voice cold. "We've been looking for you." The man before them was the final link in her father's criminal dealings, the one who had orchestrated it all. He was the mastermind behind the illegal businesses, the manipulator who had kept everything hidden for so long. And now, Maya was about to confront him face to face. Mr. Caldwell's expression was smug, his eyes glinting with arrogance. "You think you've won, don't you?" he sneered, stepping closer. "Your father was nothing. He was just a pawn in a much larger game." Maya's pulse quickened. She had spent so much time uncovering the truth, so much effort in piecing together the puzzle of her father's life. And now, standing before her, was the man who had pulled all the strings. "Your father made a deal with me a long time ago," Mr. Caldwell continued. "Everything he did was for me. All of it. His success, his power, his wealth. It was all part of my plan. You think I'm the villain here? You're wrong. Your father was just as much a part of this as I am." Maya's heart ached as she listened to his words. The man who had raised her, the man she had called her father, had been just another player in Caldwell's game. All those years of love, of devotion, had been built on lies. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why did he do it? Why did he choose to live like this?" Caldwell laughed darkly. "Your father was weak, Maya. He wanted power, control. And I gave it to him, but in the end it was all about money. Everything comes down to money, doesn't it?" Maya's mind raced. She had spent years trying to understand her father's actions, trying to make sense of the man he had become. And now, here was the answer. A bitter pill she wasn't sure she could swallow. "You've taken everything from me," Maya whispered, her voice filled with rage. "But I won't let you take anything more." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Caldwell. "It's over. We've got the evidence. You'll never get away with it." Mr. Caldwell's expression faltered for just a moment, and Maya saw the panic flash across his face. He knew they had him cornered. He tried to regain his composure, but it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no going back. With a final, defiant look, Caldwell turned to leave, but Ethan grabbed his arm, stopping him. "You're not going anywhere. You're done." The authorities had already been notified, and as the sound of sirens grew closer, Maya felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The truth had been exposed, and the man who had caused so much damage was finally going to face the consequences. As they stood there, watching the police take Caldwell away, Maya turned to Ethan. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaky. "I couldn't have done this without you." Ethan gave her a small smile. "You did it, Maya. You found the strength to face the truth." Maya nodded, a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she felt like she could breathe. The past was no longer controlling her. The secrets had been uncovered, the lies exposed. But as the sun began to set, Maya knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for it. She had uncovered the truth, and nothing could take that away from her. She was finally free. The final revelation and a new beginning. Maya sat at her desk, staring at the stack of papers in front of her. Her hands, though steady, trembled slightly. The weight of everything she had uncovered felt heavier than ever now. She had spent weeks sifting through the layers of deceit, uncovering the shadows of her father's life, each revelation more crushing than the last. The man she had known as her father was not the person she thought he was. His legacy was marred by corruption, secrets, and an empire built on lies. But now, everything was coming to a head. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Ethan. "We need to meet, there's something important." Her heart raced. The last time she'd heard from him had been a few days ago, when he had shared a crucial piece of evidence that linked her father to an underground syndicate of proof that could shatter the family's reputation forever. Maya had been on the edge, torn between exposing the truth and protecting herself from the danger it would inevitably bring. But there was no going back now. She grabbed her coat and headed out the door. The air outside was chilly, the streets of the city bustling as always, but Maya felt isolated in the crowd. Her mind kept drifting back to the discovery she had made a few days earlier, the document that had finally confirmed her suspicions. Her father had been involved in far more than illegal business deals. He had been entangled in organized crime, money laundering, and had connections to dangerous people. It was a world she never knew existed in her family's polished public life. As she walked toward the cafe where she and Ethan had agreed to meet, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a news alert. The headline read, "Sullivan Industries under investigation for alleged ties to organized crime." Her heart sank. She had feared this day would come, the day when her family's name would be dragged through the mud. But seeing it in black and white, knowing that her father's actions had finally caught up with them, was a bitter pill to swallow. The family's wealth, their reputation, everything she had once admired and respected, was about to crumble. She pushed the door open, the warmth of the cafe contrasting sharply with the cold air outside. Ethan was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, his usual calm demeanor hiding the tension in his eyes. He stood up as she approached, his expression serious. "Maya," he said, his voice low. "We need to talk." She nodded, taking a seat across from him. "I saw the news," she said quietly. "It's happening, isn't it?" Ethan didn't reply right away, on there, his gaze flicking to the window as if he were gathering his thoughts. "Yes, it's bigger than we thought. Your father's connections go deep, and now the authorities are closing in. They're not just investigating Sullivan Industries anymore, they're going after anyone connected to him, and that includes you." Maya's stomach twisted in knots. "I didn't ask for any of this," she said, her voice shaky but resolute. "I just wanted to know the truth. But now, I don't know what to do." Ethan reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. "I know this is hard, Maya, but you've done something most people would never be brave enough to do. You've uncovered the truth, and that's something you can't take back. But now you have a choice. You can either let the past consume you, or you can take control of your future, Sahaya." Maya's mind raced. She had spent so long chasing after the truth, piecing together the broken fragments of her father's life, that she had almost forgotten to think about her own. But now, as Ethan's words sank in, she realized something crucial. Exposing the past didn't mean she had to let it define her. "Where do I go from here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes meeting hers. "You have the power now, Maya. You can decide what you want your life to be. You've already taken the hardest step facing the truth. Now it's about what you do with that knowledge." Maya felt a weight lifting off her chest, and for the first time in a long while, she could breathe freely. And the truth about her father, about everything that had been hidden from her, was painful, but it was also liberating. She no longer had to live in the shadow of lies. She no longer had to play the role that had been assigned to her. She had the power to create her own future. "I'm going to start over," Maya said, her voice steady now. "I'll make sure that everything my father built, everything he was involved in, doesn't taint who I am. I'm going to find my own path." Ethan smiled, his expression proud. "I believe in you, Maya. You're stronger than you know." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. Maya's mind was no longer consumed with the past. She had found clarity, and with it, the strength to move forward. She had a new mission now, not just to expose her father's secrets, but to rebuild her life on her own terms. As they stood to leave the cafe, Maya felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey had been long, and the road ahead would be far from easy, but she was ready to face whatever came next. The truth had set her free, and now, for the first time in her life, she was free to choose her own destiny.